No, but we're rolling. Oh well, we can talk about it in a second. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jeff. This is The Verses. We are a platform for promoting underrepresented voices in poetry, and we are super excited to have with us tonight Violeta. Hey,
Hey, Jeff.
how are you
Hello,
today?
everybody.
So you have some very exciting news. You have a book out.
I do.
Congratulations.
Thank
And
you.
how did you just actually really quick? How did you? Could you show us that cover again? How did you decide
Yeah.
on this cover?
Oh, well, that is a very important part of the story of the book. You can see the title there, The Broken Moon Diaries, if my lighting permits. So, yeah, maybe. That's
There it is.
better.
Got it.
So, these are, well, I'm from Mexico City, and there's something we call the three roots that we belong to the three um, uh, racial roots.
Mm,
So one is, um, like the European, the Europeans who came and colonized us, and also brought like Afro descendants and the indigenous people who were already there. So we are this mix, and the book is named after. There's a Mexican goddess, well, Aztec actually, who is a dismembered goddess, and she is at the anthropology museum. It's a beautiful stone slab with her members kind of put together like a jigsaw puzzle. It's a very,
interesting.
if you see the piece at the museum, it's really striking because um it's carved in stone, and it's very ancient.
So you've seen it
So
in
she
person.
was, one of our foundational myths, and her name is Koyoksauki. She's the moon goddess. So for me, that was the symbol of. I don't know if you ever read this novel by Simone de Beauvoir called like The Broken Woman.
I have not.
It's translated in English as something
Mm-hmm.
else, but in the original French, the literal name would be The Broken Woman,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the story of basically of a woman who's like completely broken after a love affair. So I thought, what would, I really like that novel, but I thought, Simone de Beauvoir, she's
Mm-hmm.
French, she's European, but what would that same like brokenness look like
Mm-hmm.
for a woman of color,
Mm-hmm.
um, from, uh, yeah, from Mexico, and not just like not specifically me, but just a woman of color like going through these circumstances, right? And what kind of voices would bring out that brokenness. I was really interested in bringing out like a pained language.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that was the origin of the title of the collection.
Mm-hmm. No, that's really great. Super interesting. Have you seen the slab like in person?
Oh yeah, several
Yeah.
times.
Several.
It was actually one of my favorite like sculptures, because the story, it's a super long story, but basically when they found this goddess, and it was like the electric company that found it,
Of course.
it changed the story of like Mexico City, because they were like, oh, we didn't know she was that important. Okay, the archaeologists were like, we might have to change some assumptions
Mm-hmm.
about the Aztec gods. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Yeah. Um, Turning back from the cover into the book itself, how long would you say it took you to write this book?
Ooh, it was a really long time, because I started it in 2017, and it was scheduled to come out in 2019, but the pandemic slowed things down, so it
Yeah,
came
sure.
out in 2022, although it was scheduled for 2020. It was ready in 2020. So
Mm-hmm.
yes, 3 years.
Mm-hmm. And when you started, did you know that, like, hey, this is all going to be an entire collection, or were you kind of just writing random poems that just kind of fit together?
The funny thing is, it did start like, I had the name before I had the any of the poems, because I had that concept of, what's my own version of like, the French feminists take on, the experience of brokenness for
Mm-hmm.
women.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And I forgot to say that I didn't answer your question fully, but the cover, and it's an illustrated poetry book, actually. You can see some of the
Oh, hey,
illustrations here. Yeah, so it's not
that's
just the
great.
cover, it's the same artist, but it actually is the whole collection is illustrated, and the illustrator is a very important part of this book. Her name is Perla Temolzi. She's a visual artist from Mexico City, and she's like central to how the making of the book, because of course I came up with the poems, but once we had like the full length of the book, then she was commissioned to illustrate it. So the book wouldn't have had that completeness without the illustration.
That's something you don't see as often in poetry books. I mean, you can think of like broadsides and stuff, but how would you say that process is different if you're working with an illustrator versus with kind of just more traditional formatting?
I love it. I mean, I asked my publisher, "You sure you want this collection to be illustrated?" That's more typical young adult. Like, we're not writing a young adult book, are we? Right? And he was like, "That's fine. Like, I think people will find that more compelling." And I thought, "Oh my god, that's brilliant. That's just brilliant," you know. And it turned out to be, I think, central to the book, really attracting a lot of attention because the illustrations speak for the book itself without reading the poems.
How
Yeah.
involved? Like, how does that work? Like, if someone has a poetry collection, they're like, okay, I have this manuscript, I want to get this out, but I want to include illustrations. Like, is that something the publisher handles? Is that something you have to handle? You'd be like, oh, you like percentage of your royalties or whatever have to go to that. Like, how does that process work in terms of like the
Well,
financing?
yeah. Well, it was the first time I had been in a process where there were all these moving parts, because I was in charge with, communicating the content to the
Yeah.
illustrator, because she didn't speak English. So I had to like tell her what was the concept behind the book and titles of the poems. And so it was really like a very beautiful collaboration, because I learned, how collective the like bookmaking process was, because this is like a very small independent publishing house in Washington State. So it basically was me, the publisher, the illustrator, and the graphic designer, and also the book cover designer. So it was beautiful to really be part of that production process, because I really got to develop a friendship with all of the creators of the book. Yes, it was beautiful.
In terms of languages in the book is primarily in English, all in English, primarily in Spanish,
Yeah,
bilingual.
it's all in English. It actually won like the subcategory that it won of the Latino Book Awards is Juan Felipe Herrera, which is like a Mexican American poet. Juan Felipe Herrera, best book of poetry in English award. So yeah, it's like there were three categories, like English, Spanish, and bilingual. But this one is like, even one of the blurb like reviewers told me, "Hey, why didn't you use more Spanish? Oh my god, this book is primarily in English." And I was like, yeah, like that was part of the point, like that sometimes as Latinos in the United States were stigmatized as, oh, you have to produce like bilingual books. No, we can just write in English too, and I really like to like challenge people, right? So whatever they assume I am, I'm like, actually no, actually don't write in Spanish. I actually write only in Spanglish, and I just love doing that because I feel they can't pin me down that way.
That's great. That's great. When you
Yeah.
use Spanish words in your work, I always find this
There's like
like
seven, yeah.
yeah. But like so the big debate I feel like nowadays is like do you italicize or do you just let it go? Like no, like it's not something that's needs to stand out that way.
I don't. I think most like Chicanos and Latinos like in the US right now, at least like the more political ones, are like, no, no, no. Spanish is not a foreign language in the United States. Come on, it's the second most spoken language. We speak like that, right? So italicizing is like foreignizing
Mm-hmm.
a language that isn't foreign for us. So it's really important that we keep it as part of the same body
Mm-hmm.
of the work.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm totally
Yeah.
understand that. Just want to get your thoughts on that. That's great.
Yeah, it's still a debate, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. No, I don't. I can see arguments for both sides, but I certainly understand that.
Oh, for sure.
That's definitely the way I tend to lean if I'm using words from other languages. But um, what would you say in writing this? All right, so tell us a little bit about the process, if you don't mind. So
Of
you have these
course.
poems, you're doing contests, I'm guessing, or were you just like submitting to publishing houses and just kind of saying, "Hey, here's my manuscript."
Yeah, I mean, actually, it was more of the latter. It was
Okay.
kind of wild because I waited for the manuscript to be completed, but I had a pitch for the publisher, which was
Mm,
it's a hybrid collection. There's one essay at the end, which is called The Sleepless Generation and is basically about it's not about broken women, it's about a broken generation,
mm-hmm,
basically broken through exploitation.
mm-hmm,
And millennials us. And so that was my pitch for the publisher. It was a conference in NIMLA, Northeastern Modern Languages Association in Boston. It was right before the pandemic hit, and I pitched him that piece when I found out he had a very like politically oriented like publishing house, and he's like quite a radical. We made like instant friendship, and I was like, well, I think he would like my piece, and actually that piece is part of a larger collection, so if you want to
mm,
publish it, like. And so that was the way it came to. Yeah, it came to have a and it's funny because I was so confident in the book that I didn't even think of where it would be published. I was like, okay,
mm,
I'm gonna make the book first, and then
mm-hmm,
we'll see. I will not worry. I was in my master in like Athens. My master's I did in like Athens, Ohio, which is like a
mm-hmm.
very quiet town,
Yeah.
and I used it as my MFA because I didn't get into an MFA at that time or a writing program. So I was like, I don't care. I'm gonna do my book and publish it, and that's it. I was like,
Mm-hmm,
I'm not going to rely on workshops. I'm not going to rely on having teachers that are egging me on, please submit to contest. I was like,
mm-hmm,
nope, first the book has to be done, and I was very disciplined about it. And once it was done, I just like pitched it in that academic conference.
mm-hmm,
I feel it was more my confidence in this has to be born, who wants to
mm-hmm,
take it.
mm-hmm,
Yeah.
mm-hmm. In terms of the contests you won, first of all, can you say what contests you
Oh no,
won
I
against
think
those?
you're freezing.
Oh no. Can you hear me? Check, check, one, two,
Yeah,
one,
I can
two.
hear you fine.
Okay, cool. I'm gonna shift the focus to you. Can you tell us a little bit about the contests that the book was submitted to?
Yes. Well, actually, since the book was produced, it was printed on April, at the very beginning of April, we didn't have a chance to submit to a lot of contests because the Latino Book Award, I think, closed by the end of April. So my publisher said, hey, you sure you want me to submit to the Latino Book Awards? Because they're closing in 50. I have like 10 days to submit this book. And
Mm-hmm,
it's really expensive. And he had to send a bunch of copies. And first he had to send it to my apartment because he was moving. And I was like, no, please, like this is my big aim. I was like, I already even knew the kind
mm-hmm,
of award that I thought this book might fit into. And I was like, no, no, no. I know we can wait a year and do it like with more time, but I like begged him, and he was like, all right, I'll submit. So he got it in like right on the deadline. And I knew that was like my big shot because for some reason the like cycle, the application cycle for awards, as far as I know, but I'm only learning about that right now,
mm-hmm,
was at that time when it was published. So it was like we would be way more eligible if you waited like
mm-hmm.
after April. And I was like, no. So that was like such a great
That's great. Look at you gambling on yourself. That's so wonderful to hear, and it paid off, obviously. Um, What was
Yeah, it's funny because I like, yeah, felt like the book, you know, the book had a life of its own and it knew where it
mm-hmm,
wanted to go.
mm-hmm,
Yeah.
mm-hmm. In total, how many contests did you apply to?
I think I mean, for that award, I think it was just that one because again,
Mm-hmm.
after that, the turnaround was like really short. I think they took like 2 months to tell us it
Mm-hmm.
had won. So we hadn't had time to submit to more. And I was like, oh my
Mm-hmm.
God, the only contest we applied to, we
That's wild.
won like a gold medal. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
That's even more impressive. Yeah. I mean, this
Thank
because you
you.
hear about, um, I was talking with Timbe Jess, and he was saying like when Olio came out, he's like, yeah, I had that book out at 30 different contests at any given time.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So
That's
like
wild.
the fact you're
Yeah, I
like
did
one for
feel
one, your
really
batting
lucky.
average.
And
Wow.
also the second inaugural, it was also um um, I hope it's not my signal.
Oh no, it's
But
okay. I can hear you. Okay.
oh great, okay.
I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, but it was even like very I was really honored to receive that award because it was also part of like a second like inaugural cohort of awards that that the Latino Book Awards just came with called like the Rising Stars Award, and it was for like emerging authors
Mm,
like myself. So it was like big check and to fully support our career as like professional authors. It was like, okay, here you go, like use this to get forward in your career to
mm-hmm.
become an established author. So
That's
I
great.
just felt so blessed. I was like, oh my God, like they believed in me so much that they really supported me like no other institution ever had before.
Mm-hmm.
I was really young.
Mm-hmm. That's why there's so many things just seem to have come together at the same time for this book. Like this book was supposed to do the work, and it's
Right.
doing it, and that's great. Yeah. Um, other last things that you'd kind of like to share about it? Maybe like tips for people with manuscripts and things like that.
Yeah, for sure. I'm always really, I have like a writing collective where I share like a lot of resources with friends, and we really push each other to submit to different contests. So I guess my biggest advice would be to get used to the process of submission and rejection. So for
Mm,
sending like a bunch of individual poems and to contests, and once you have the full manuscript, you have to submit. This was my experience with my third manuscript. I think I submitted to at least 15 different presses, or probably more, like 20 something presses, until I got it accepted.
yeah.
I don't know if you can hear me.
I can hear you. Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh
Hopefully you can hear
no,
me as well.
Jeff.
Okay. I can hear you okay. Can you still hear me? Maybe.
I'm
Cutting out briefly. I'm gonna check my
cutting
connection really
out.
quick. Hey, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Fingers crossed. We're almost done, I promise. Come on, internet,
Sorry
hang
about
on.
the interruptions.
No, it's all good. Um, great. Now, before we have you read one poem, can you just talk to us really quick? So on October 8th, you're going to be joining us on a series of talks. You're giving like a 30-minute kind of real quick mini lecture on a topic. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you're going to be discussing to help writers?
Yes. Well, to my previous point, I'm actually going to discuss strategies for applying to residencies, poetry contests, and submitting manuscripts, because I think these are resources that take years to build, and to build a network that really allows you to know where you have to submit, how you have to submit, and how do you kind of have to market yourself to do that. So I think this is like really valuable information for emerging writers, and but especially because it's really easy to get discouraged, right?
Yes.
So it's
Yes.
very important to get used to like rejection, and do the work, keep on doing the work every month, submitting every month,
Mm-hmm.
until it's out. It'll be born. We just don't know when.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's great. No, I'm super, super excited for that talk. It's something that I think Columbus, I imagine Cincinnati's the same way. There's so many people that, write but aren't necessarily getting the work out into the world. And
Yes.
this is one of those. There's many different platforms, but this is one of the major ones for getting exposure. So I'm super excited to get valuable tips from that talk.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me to.
Yeah, excited for the talk. We have so many great things. So again, if you're not familiar, what's happening again on October 8th, basically from 3:30 to 7:30 p.m. We're just gonna have. I'm gonna be hitting you with. I think there's like 6 mini lectures on topics related to, again, applying to MFA programs, experience with MFA programs, submitting poems, writing artist statements, just some elements of craft, for instance, writing persona poems. So many poetry things to be excited about. Hopefully, it's the first of many talks like this. But Violeta, I don't want to take too much more of your time. If you could, really quick, share a poem with us from your
Of
collection.
course. I'd be happy to. Here's a poem from Broken Woman Diaries, which is called Short Lived Love. It's all right, girl, if they don't all bloom. All the flowers you bought at the market in the summer, thinking they would stay toward the fall. Some of them are still alive. Let them live, unhindered by the death of the others. Let the others quietly wither in their corner. Brush away their brown remnants, a testimony of their fallen bodies. There are no graves for this, only the soil recycling the dead matter, molecule to molecule, leaf to leaf. Except their failed struggle, like yours, is an indicator of the naked beauty of their brief lives. No, you gave them enough water. No, you gave them enough light. Thanks for listening.
For sure. And again, you can find this book. I'm just going to share my screen really, really quick. Infinite windows and everything. Give me one sec. Here it is. So you can find this book here. Be sure to check it out. Is this the best place to get it? Or is there more
Yes.
way to get it from you? This is the best place. Okay,
Yes,
cool.
that is the best place to get it.
Perfect. We'll be sure to include links in the description afterwards. And of course, you can also follow Violeta here on Instagram. Check her name and things like that. Follow her. Keep up to date with her poetry. It can only do good things for you. Violeta, thank you so much for being with us today. We really appreciate it. If you can hang on for a moment while I close and
Sure.
just have one thing. But thank you to
Thanks for
everyone for joining
having
us
me.
today. And we'll talk soon. Thank you, guys.